Hi, I'm Jennifer Giesbrecht from the Area Agency on Aging. I'm here today with the multidisciplinary team from Bonner County that works on vulnerable adult abuse. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And I'm going to start right over here.
I'm Paul Graves from Elder Advocates.
I'm Darrell Wheeler, the Bonner County Sheriff.
I'm Pearlie Gates from Panhandle State Bank.
And I'm Dawn Rice from Panhandle State Bank.
We're going to have a little discussion about exploitation as it is defined in Idaho Code 395302, which means an action which may include but is not limited to the unjust or improper use of a vulnerable adult's financial, power of attorney, funds, property, or resources by another person for profit or advantage. So we're here today to talk about exploitation as it relates to vulnerable adults. And I should tell you that a vulnerable adult is a person that cannot make, communicate, or implement a decision that is in their best interest. So that's the population we're talking about today. So what do we run into, you guys, in our community? What do we see?
Let me start, Jennifer. I came across an emotionally vulnerable adult, or at least secondhand. I was called by a local banker, and he was really wanting more confirmation that he had done the right thing. He had a situation come to his attention where a grandson was virtually taking all of his grandmother's monthly Social Security check. Initially, it was because he had access to it. He was on the account, and this came to his attention not from the grandmother but from the grandfather, and he was concerned that their grandson was taking advantage of the mother.
And how did he find out about this? Did a bank alert him, or how did he find out that this was happening?
Well, I think the grandfather made contact with him initially. Then he called somebody from within his banking system to find out what's the protocol.
Okay.
And the result was that he contacted Adult Protective Services. The caseworker made contact with the grandmother, and she was not ready to press any kind of issue with it.
Okay.
And subsequently, though, the grandson was taken off the account, but he still gets the money because she's so emotionally dependent on him that she gives him the money.
Well, and we see that quite often.
Yes.
So from your great example, I heard two things. I heard that there was a financial institution component that was really important for us to verify who's on the account, who has access to the funds. And then I heard that there was a crime happening here as well. Can one of you start this and let's discuss, where do we go with this?
Sure. A perspective from law enforcement, it's very important that the victim or a family member contact some agency. And I know when they contact the Area Agency on Aging, that a lot of times you may start the investigation and find out that there is a crime occurring. And at that point, law enforcement really does need to get involved. And by calling dispatch, depending on the jurisdiction they live in, if they, say for instance in Bonner County, if they live in the unincorporated county, that's where the crime is occurring, they would call the Bonner County Sheriff's Office. But if it's, say, occurring in the city of Sandpoint, then the detectives there would be the lead in investigating that. But it's very important that at least we're notified and involved in the process. So many times it is difficult to get prosecution because the victim does not want to prosecute. And unless there's a victim, we can't really go forward to the prosecutor for charges.
Right. Well, and Paul highlighted the fact that this woman didn't want to cause trouble.
Right. Yes.
So is she still the victim?
She's still a victim, and law enforcement will get involved. We will expose the fraud that's occurring, contact for instance, the victim, their parents, their guardian, and get them involved in the process. And maybe that the court may determine that they are so vulnerable that they cannot take care of their own finances. And then that's when Health and Welfare Department of Aging gets involved in the process, and we can step in and ultimately protect that victim.
Okay, so, that's great direction for all of everyone in our community to know when we should report and when we should not report, even though the person says, I don't wanna really cause any trouble here. But we've got the other component, and that is the financial institution side. And explain to us what information you're able to release to someone that is concerned.
Well, that is a problem due to confidentiality. And I think as bank employees, it can be very frustrating because we can see it, we can see people being pressured, large cash withdrawals. You have to go by the policy, who's authorized, like you said, if they come in, they don't wanna prosecute, we feel that our hands are tied. So most of the personnel are trained to notify red flags, when red flags come up.
And what would
And
that be? What would a red flag be?
Being pressured, that's one
Okay.
big thing we see is someone coming in with an adult and you can tell that they're pressuring them to do something that they really don't wanna do, or maybe that they don't really understand what they're doing, and we're aware of that, large cash withdrawals,
Okay,
or we do sometimes see unauthorized withdrawals on their account. So that's where at a bank too, we need to know what we can do. Like you said, Daryl, if they don't wanna prosecute, our hands are tied, so
Right.
what could we really do to help these people?
And there's another aspect to that, Jennifer, too, is if the victim doesn't want to prosecute, sometimes during the investigation, we'll find out that actually the bank is the victim because they fraudulently attained funds by signing someone else's signature, and at that point, they're guilty of fraud, and we can prosecute just on that evidence.
and then the bank would be the victim.
Correct.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so
so we've
that's,
seen that with forged signatures and.
okay, so that's another avenue.
Mhm.
I think the message should be, is if you suspect there is fraud going on, you need to report it, so that we can at least identify who the involved parties are, and we can at least stop it and step in on behalf of the victim and their families.
Absolutely. So in Adult Protective Services, we frequently will get a report from a bank, and we're not able to access real specific information. We're charged with answering one question, really. Is it more likely than not that it's happening? Do we have enough information to say it's credible from the bank? So we may not see copies of the checks, we may not see the withdrawals, but we may get a report from you
Yes.
saying,
We could discuss that aspect.
okay, so we could have that conversation.
Yes.
At that point, then I would turn it over, I would say, yeah, I think this is happening. I would turn it over to law enforcement.
And we have other tools, even though the family may not want to be involved, and I know there's limitations on the bank, we can get orders from the court to release those documents to us so we can continue and finish our investigation and use those procedures that sometimes the victim won't want to partake in and be involved in.
Right.
And also, they can also sign a letter of release giving the law enforcement agency permission to obtain those and avoid the whole process of going to a judge for those orders, and the bank recognizes those.
Okay, good information today. And Paul, thank you for bringing that example. Can we wrap this up with you telling us, was there resolution to this?
Not to the banker's satisfaction, certainly, because the grandmother is still giving the money to the grandson. And what he's using it for is probably not germane to the conversation, I don't even know, but it's still ongoing. but it's a choice that the grandmother is consciously making. I got the sense that maybe the grandmother and the grandfather are not in agreement with,
Oh, and that happens,
and so that may cause some unnecessary tension between
right.
the person, the two older adults.
Exactly, and as a community, we don't have to try to sort that out. We just have to say, are there red flags? Are there things that other people need to know about? And come together and make sure that we're reporting things in a sensitive way so that we get community partners involved to look at these things.
Exactly.
Well, thank you all for doing this. I think we need to have some more discussions in the
Okay.
future about this topic. Yes.
You bet.